Greetings, people from all over the room. I was going to pick up the accordion and do some fun accordion videos, but I still have some injuries. I'm not ready to pick up the accordion, so I apologize. And if you really think these videos are crappy, then for the low price of 50 million tax dollars, you can have me impeached. It's that simple. Okay, I always talk about simplifying and standardizing. And I told you before that to simplify, I pretty much have to go deep and study and research, go into the complex, and then get back to the simple. So with the amplified circle of fifths, well, here's what happened. I failed, as you know, at developing an ultimate scale chord system, right? The ultimate, all-in-one system. And I also failed at integrating my perfect chord, my theoretical perfect chord. I failed at integrating that into my already existing chord system. Right here, I had a system, I still do, but I couldn't get this perfect chord in there. It just didn't work. Now, even though I failed at that, I used the primitive, the old circle of fifths. This is just one example. I was using that in my studies, and I ended up developing my own circle of fifths. It's a whole lot better. I call it the amplified circle of fifths. I put a date on here, but I don't know when I finished it. I don't think it'll ever be finished. All right? Then I made videos on that, quite a few. Then I talked about how the modes, as we know modes, all right, as they relate to the amplified circle of fifths. Then I showed the correlated scales that go with the modes, all right, the correlated scale. Let's say this mode here has a correlated scale. And I showed that these scales, and I use my scale phrase system names for all my scales now. I hate the traditional names. These scales are made of two scale phrases, two distinct scale phrases. I talked about that briefly. Now I want to show, do more of a close-up to show how these scale phrases can work with the amplified circle of fifths. So I did videos on this, and I showed a scale phrase. Here's an example. It's a four-tone group. And I did a whole bunch of videos on this. So you have two scale phrases. Here you have a major scale phrase and another major. And you see the half steps in between your tones. And you see this bridge step, all right? That's your step in between your two scale phrases. All right, I talked about that. I talked about how you ultimately end up with a scale phrase system, eight-tone scale. It's made of two scale phrases. It has that bridge step to connect them. And it has 12 steps in between, 12 half steps in total. All right? In other words, 12 total half steps from your tonic to the octave of your tonic. I'm going to make that clear. All right? Then you also have, this is very important, you have 8 different tones. There's no duplicates here. You have 8 categorically different tones. All right? So I did videos on that, so you understand that. And just in case, I'll show you one more sample. This is an augmented scale phrase, and that's a minor scale phrase, and I put them together, and I get the augmented minor 2 scale. Now I did explain that this scale has traditional or contemporary names, and I showed them and I talked about them, and they're really crappy. Unless you're really well versed in music history and tradition, you just kind of not going to understand this. You really have to be pretty learned, which I don't think I am, and most modern musicians aren't. So that's an example. It's a scale phrase system, 8-tone scale. Now, I showed the 7 traditional modes in my videos and the correlated scales, right? I showed that, and there were 7 of them. Then I showed you how I mapped them out on my amplified circle of fifths. Right, this is the mode number here. That's the mode number. but these are the scales. Let me just show you these again. These are the correlated scales mapped out on the amplified circle of fifths. I showed this many times. Okay, that's 7, and that covers the 7 traditional modes. All right, let's go back to the 7 traditional modes. Here's the traditional modes, the correlated scale names, and the scale phrases that are used to make these scales. Now, the beautiful thing is, you see here, well, let's look at the scale phrases that we would need to make those 7 modes or correlated scales. Let's take a look at that up close. So here's your major scale phrase. I did videos on this. Here's your minor, all right? Your minor 2 scale phrase, your augmented, diminished, right? That's only 5. There's 8 in total. That's only 5, but that's all you need. That's all the scale phrases that you need to make these scales. In other words, these modes or correlated scales, and these are the scale phrases I just showed. And you only need 5 in this case. You don't need all 8. Now that's a beautiful thing because, first of all, compared to the traditional system that took hundreds of years to develop, mine just comes out as is. It's what you see is what you get. Scale phrases, very simple. You take a bunch of tones, you line them up, you name them. It can't get any simpler. And the reason why I keep talking about this is because the more I study my own system, the more I think, wow, it's really, really practical. So here's your scale phrases. Now you need to combine two of these to get a scale, right? So we do that. We combine two major scale phrases. You get your C major scale. C minor scale, 2 minor scale phrases. See that? Minor, minor. C minor 2, 2 minor scale phrases. C augmented minor, all right? Excuse me, C augmented major. But I just use the nickname. I just call it the C augmented scale because your C major scale phrase is kind of a default. So I ordinarily use the nickname. Nicknames are okay in my system, but that's a C augmented major scale, right? Then here's a C major minor. I hope I'm saying this right. That's a major scale phrase and a minor. Then here's your C minor, minor 2 scale. But here again, I use the nickname minor 3, okay? Because once you learn this system, you'll understand why the nicknames are so handy. You see minor 3 because you have a minor, or you could say minor 1, and a minor 2. So you have 3, all right? Or you could say, there's your first minor scale in my system, your second, and that's the third one. So either way it works out. It's a really nice nickname. And here's the C minor 2 augmented scale with a minor 2 scale phrase and an augmented scale phrase. And these are the correlated scales, all right, that would go with the traditional modes, okay? Here's the same thing, only written out, all right, with words instead of symbols. I just showed you these. I just showed you these here. And one more time quickly. Your C major scale, very, very simple. 2 major scale phrases. C minor scale, very, very simple. C minor 2 scale, you can see that, very simple, very practical, logical. C augmented major, and I use a little nickname there, augmented. C major minor. This one here you would likely call in traditional or contemporary, you would call that a dominant scale. That's probably what you'd call it. Then the C minor minor 2, which I just nicknamed minor 3. This is really nice, the minor and the minor 2 scale phrase. I'll show you that later. And then here's your C minor 2 augmented, which I've shown in other videos. I've actually played this scale on the accordion several times. It's a really nice scale. That's a really nice, okay, and that's what you get. Now you say, well, what does that have to do with the amplified circle of fifths? Well, when you map these out, when you use my system, the two scale phrases, and you clearly differentiate between the major feature in one or the minor feature in another, or the diminished feel or the augmented feeling, you can more easily envision those scales on the amplified circle of fifths. For example, here's your major. That's your scale shape. When you map them out, you get a scale shape. That's what we call it. That's in my system. You get scale shapes. So here's your major. Now here's that minor 3. That's a nickname, but that's okay. All right? So what you have here, you can easily identify this scale as a minor because you see you have your C and your E flat, your minor third relationship in there. And because of the way I designed the amplified circle of fifths, each data ring, all right, each data ring moves out a minor third. And that's a nice thing because see, with your minor scales, when you map them out and you get a scale shape, all right, you get your minor third relationship here. It's very easy to see and you can quickly identify that scale because when you see this, you know that's going to be a minor something. When you see that, let's look at another page. So here's a C minor, all right? Now we know from what I showed you that will have two minor scale phrases. And here we have the same thing. We have the minor scale identifier. We have the C, E flat. And not only that, but remember what I said in my previous videos? That C, your tonic, is in your minor data ring. See, that makes that a nice feature for identification. So back here you had your C minor 3 that I just showed. That's a nickname. And you have your C in your minor data ring. That's another handy tool to help you envision not only what the scale is, but what the mood is of the scale. Now, you have, here's a C minor 2 augmented, which we talked about, all right? And you get your scale shape here. Now you see that the C is in the diminished data ring, but that's totally cool because you see your C, E flat relationship there. And not only that, but in your diminished chords, all right, in those diminished chords, your relationship from your root to your third is a minor third. So that C can be in the diminished data ring or the minor data ring, and it will work. So you see that, how that works? Now see, here's your C augmented scale, and we know that this is a nickname. We know this is actually the C augmented major scale, but you see how your C, your tonic, falls in your major data ring. It's a beautiful thing. These things actually work together, and I could almost say that it was kind of an accident. I mean, it was a little special treat for me because it just worked out that way. And then you have two remaining scales here for study. C major minor, but your first scale phrase, okay, that's the critical one. Remember we talked about that. The first scale phrase is critical. You see your C is in your major data ring, right? And you do not see that C E flat thing here. See, you do not see that. So you know that there's no, you know that's not that first scale phrase is not a minor. Your C is here. The E flat is not a part of that scale shape. Now here's the C minor 2. So we know that this scale is made of two minor 2 scale phrases. And right there you have it. Your C and your E flat relationship within your scale shape, and your C is in your minor data ring. And I just think it's great. It's logical. It's great. And think about it with your own mind. Review some of these videos, and you determine for yourself if the scale phrase system, my system for scales, works well and logically and nicely with my amplified circle of fifths. I think it does. And like I said, once I get healed and I stop hurting, I'll pick up that accordion, I promise. So thanks for being patient again. And I'd really like to start playing some music, if at all possible. Thank you, and good night.